There you go. There's interoperability, David. Did you listen?
I did listen. I am so much more knowledgeable now.
But not enthused.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. For those of you who are new, it could be the HIPAA podcast. The HIPAA podcast. Or the. I don't know. How does that work?
Let's don't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, let's don't do that. That makes my head hurt.
Potato.
Or effect and affect.
Oh, God, that hurt. The aardvark. I never can remember which one makes the arrow in his ass.
Even when I look that up, I still go, I don't really know which one.
I know.
Pick one. So I'm sure a listener will email us and be like, it's this. Just use this.
Idiot.
So last week, we talked about, first of all, you being on your deathbed, coming back.
Yes.
So are you doing better this week? You sound a lot better than you did last week.
Yeah, I sounded awful. I listened to it. It was, and the interesting thing is I sounded better than I felt. So, and I didn't sound like much of anything, but I'm a trooper, I can get the job done. I'm there. But right now I'm feeling pretty good. It's Friday.
Yeah, but now you got to recover from all those days where you didn't get anything productive done.
That's right. So there's no fun in my life, none.
Yeah, so at least you have a holiday weekend coming up that you won't have as many things thrown at you. So maybe you can catch up on something.
I'm spending that free day with you.
Who else would you rather spend it with?
I am.
Don't answer that. Don't answer that.
I am going. I am going tonight to a friend. Their brewery is opening tonight. The Abbey of the Holy Goats Brewery in Roswell, Georgia, and I'm really excited about it. So there's a plug for my friend's brewery, which, those things I hold dear to my heart. I was afraid it's going to be too sick I can't miss the special golden ticket night. So anyhow, I'm feeling well enough to get that done. May have to take a nap, but I'm going.
Awesome. Well, that's a perfect segue in the audits.
I know, really, isn't it? So yeah, that'll work. You need a cocktail.
Yeah, you might.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, you have been well enough lately to attend some awesome conferences, some in person, some online.
Yes.
And you are bringing a lot of information back to discuss today.
I am here to share.
And I imagine if we wanted to, we could probably turn all that information into multiple podcasts, which we probably will. But today we're going to dive into some particular areas, but for the most part, I guess it's going to be an overview of what you heard coming from the HIPAA sphere.
Yes.
And the powers that be and some things that they had to say, which I think that the listeners will find that some of the things they had to say is, interestingly enough, some of the things that we often say.
I know. It felt powerful to hear your own stuff reiterated. Of course, not as humorous as was. No, so it was boring. But
and I bet nobody said, "I heard this on Help Me with HIPAA."
I know. I kept waiting for people to say, "Have you heard about that Help Me with HIPAA podcast?" The HIPAA podcast. Have you heard about it? Because you can get so much free information there.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, we still need listeners to promote us.
Oh yeah,
share us. Tweet us.
Like us. Slap us.
Slap David. Tell
so
people.
Share it. Share it.
Please. Share it, Sharon.
So the first conference you went to was a HIMSS conference. And we kind of talked about that a little bit last week. Mm-hmm. But I know you wanted to, there's a couple of other topics around the HIMSS conference that you wanted to talk about. So let's listen to what you have to say about interoperability first.
You're going to listen.
I'm going to listen about what I wasn't at the conference. I have nothing to say.
Well, actually, I had planned on having an episode that at the beginning of the year that talked about, these new, there's always buzzwords. And if you've been around as long as I have healthcare, you hear buzzwords. Some of them come and go quickly. Some of them hang around. You never know. There's still people that think that HIPAA will go away. We've talked about that. We're just waiting on that to get reversed. But the big current new buzzwords that are out there in I guess not just in HIPAA, but in healthcare IT as a general rule involves interoperability and data governance. And so interoperability, the reason that's such a big buzzword is, of course, everybody's talking about all the apps and now that we've gotten so many people on electronic medical records, we've got millions of ways to get data into different systems, but they're not talking to each other efficiently or at all. And, one of the problems is all of these software vendors trying to make themselves a silo and saying, well, we'll communicate with this, but you're going to pay us $20,000 just to hook up an HL7 interface.
Mm-hmm.
And for every one, you're going to pay us $20,000. So I can get this really cool lab system, for example, or a drug inventory system, but I'm going to charge you $20,000 a pop just to connect the two. And it's really to reduce interoperability. And so they've really come down on them. The ONC is making it really clear that interoperability is our next push, and we have to find ways to happily, not begrudgingly, communicate with each other. So you've got that layer of things where we've implemented things, but then the big issues are how do we allow all these wearable devices that are collecting massive amounts of data that could be used for managing healthcare? How do we get that data in there, and what's considered PHI and what's not, and how is it connected to, say, a personal health record versus an EHR of a practice, and those pieces and parts, because people have 2 or 3 wearables, 2 or 3 places that they get information. So you can certainly imagine just how much conversation was going on. And there was a whole room that was just startup competitors, people there trying to get funding for their startup that's a cool new app or whatever. And it is a big issue, both from a technical standpoint of making sure it happens, as well as from the HIPAA standpoint, because you got to remember HIPAA covers not just privacy and security, but also code set standards. And often that gets forgotten by a lot of people, but code set standards where they define how we're going to carry on these conversations. For financial transactions, they've done a lot, but they're still not quite there when it comes to medical record transactions. So there's a lot going on, a lot changing. And, is it HL7 or is it XML? And that's just for the nerds. So that is a huge conversation. Not only how do we do it, but how do we secure it? How do we standardize it? What kinds of data can be exchanged? And knowing that, my Apple Watch, for example, could be collecting my heartbeat all the time, or they could have medical devices that are specifically designed to capture information and transmit it real time back to the providers. So, there's layers and layers of things with this interoperability, and that is a huge buzzword and something that will consistently be discussed. So everybody needs to be thinking about when hey, I've got this really cool thing and I'm going to plug this data in. Halt and do your risk analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. There's interoperability, David. Did you listen?
I did listen. I am so much more knowledgeable now.
But not enthused.
No, it's a big undertaking. And of course, like you said, this is something they've been talking about a while. I imagine that it's going to take a good long while to, even after they start telling people, well, this is how we're going to do things, it's still going to take a while for all that to come into play. But like you said, there's going to be a lot more of that coming, and the decisions that practices make should be based on that for sure, because it's coming down the pipe.
Yeah, don't just get excited because now I can plug this or that in or get data from here or there, and I don't have to worry about them. They're a big company. No, don't just blindly trust. Ask the questions, get your own documentation, and it will be happening. And you never know. A patient's going to come in and say, well, why can't you just pull this data from here? Why do I have to write it down? Or, if you need to know this, why can't you just get it off of my Fitbit? So there's going to be tons of those cases that are going to be constantly cropping into your day-to-day functionality. And it doesn't matter what segment you're in, it's going to be happening, whether you're a software developer where somebody's going to be asking, how can we better interface X, Y, and Z? So, everybody's going to be dealing with interoperability. And I used to specialize when I was programming all the time in interfaces and data exchange and EDI and those kind of things. And I get really excited at the thoughts about actually being able to do it at will because it was never easy. I mean, you could know, I know the standards forwards and backwards. I mean, I can look at a file, tell you what standard it's following, all of those kind of things. But the ability to do so much more with it was just never going to, cut loose until now. So there's a lot of opportunity for cost savings and advancements in care if we can just get over the hump. So there you go.
Yeah.
Now you want to talk about data governance?
Oh, yes. Let's talk about the other big word, data governance.
Governance. So DG, you're already seeing DG. But when I see DG...
you think about Donna Grindle, don't you?
People call me DG. Hey, DG.
Or Dollar General.
DG. Yeah.
Dollar General.
Yeah, there you go. And that's how, because my handwriting's so awful, I just put my initials on everything. You can't tell it any better than my signature. But DG is data governance, and it's a term that's been used outside of healthcare now for a good while, but it's really becoming a discussion within healthcare. And that is to say, we're not just going to look at PHI. We're going to look at all of the data that an organization maintains and make sure that we are taking care of it and we are protecting it and securing it and controlling access to it. So not just, the things that we worry about under HIPAA privacy and security, but, the accounting systems and all of the other, HR systems and timekeeping systems and all of those other things that a business needs to make it run. And it's saying it's more of a, there's people that are talking about how you have a more holistic approach to medicine is what they're looking at, where you treat the patient, not just the symptoms. You're treating the patient as a whole, and you have care teams and medical homes and all of these things with that goal in mind. And data governance is basically looking at the data in the same manner, a more holistic approach to caring for the organization's data. And we see that need with all of these breaches that are not just healthcare breaches. They're all across the board. And, the big OPM breach, the federal breach, was the employees. It was not any of the other, it wasn't credit card data, it wasn't PHI, it wasn't any of those things that have a silo of protection requirements. It was something over here completely separate, but look at all the data they got. So data governance is going to be the new term, and instead of having, say, a HIPAA compliance officer and a PCI person and all of this, you're going to have somebody over all of that is the person in charge of data governance. And at the HIPAA Summit, they even had somebody that was saying, hey, all of you HIPAA people, we believe you should see data governance as part of your career path. So not just, but this is your next step up to the next level of what needs to be done. So you still have somebody that's a CISO, information security officer, and all of that kind of stuff. But somebody's going to be just in charge of data governance. And underneath that will be all these other things. So there you have it. It's defining all the data that's, it's taking HIPAA and exploding it across the entire organization's data sets. So it's saying define what data we have coming and going. There's confidentiality stuff. There's business proprietary stuff. You can imagine how hard people hack to get into emails and things from CEOs of major corporations. So it's bigger than just healthcare. And healthcare will be just a segment of the overall data governance. So all of you people that still think, HIPAA is just a thing I can avoid, you need to understand all businesses, not healthcare, all businesses are going to need to have the concept. You may not have some big office of data governance like a large organization, but the concept of data governance and cybersecurity is going to need to be part of your business, period. It's not a HIPAA thing. It's not a healthcare thing. It's not a large or small business. It's a thing. It needs to be something you think about.
Yeah. It's like, as far as the IT world goes, I know you remember this, but when broadband internet first came out, actually internet period, but it didn't have too much to do with dial-up as much as broadband. Mm-hmm. But when broadband came out, people didn't have firewalls.
Yeah.
It didn't exist. Honestly, you had to be a pretty high level IT person to even set up a firewall because they were all Linux based, and you had to have a big computer to do it and all that. And then all of a sudden one day you could walk into a store and buy one. But nowadays they're pretty much required. You can get by without one, but who would?
Right.
Everybody has firewalls. And so that's, vastly different than what it used to be. And I think this is going to be one of those things that's very similar, that everything right now, people are kind of somewhat doing it or not doing it at all. But at some point it's going to be where you're going to look back and go, wow, I can't believe we ever got along without having data governance.
See, you're assuming that people actually know they have a firewall now. That's they may have them, they don't know them, and the password's still admin. We know that's a problem. So, we're a long way from even having people actually understand there is a firewall in their home and that someone should be taking care of it. And you cannot assume that it's going to be Comcast or Charter or Time Warner or AT&T, whoever it is you think is handling your internet. They're not.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. So, the first thing I do as soon as they bring in new equipment, you have to have they want to come to your home and put the stuff in. And I just kind of stand there waiting and hold my hands out. Give it to me. I don't want you touching my stuff. Just give it to me. Tell me the parts you have to do legally. And I'll tell you the rest that you need to know. And then I'll start configuring things and you can go. It's pretty awesome. They love it.
Yep.
So, but yeah, there's the data governance and the cybersecurity framework. Those are both things that are going to float to the top, so to speak, for everyone.
Now we talked about ransomware a couple weeks ago, and I think you or I, one or maybe both of us, kind of made a little prediction that this was going to be the year of ransomware. And sure enough, we're starting to quickly see a lot more of these happen. And and they talked about LendCare at the HIPAA Summit. So what was the buzz about LendCare?
Now, LendCare was the first civil money penalty that we talked about. And when we did the review last week of the recent resolutions and fines that were happening in 2016. And so, at the time we talked about it, it was, will they appeal the administrative law judge's decision? And we found out that no, they did not appeal it. In fact, they just paid the fine and settle down. But a regular part of the conversation was, it's the same conversation that we've heard for years. You have to do a risk analysis. And your risk analysis needs to be, and I love this phrase, a real HIPAA risk analysis, not a meaningful use analysis. And even then, meaningful use does not equal HIPAA compliance. Although you could cover your meaningful use requirements under HIPAA, and you really should. But if you just do meaningful use, you're not doing HIPAA. And it's not just a gap analysis. That's not what a risk analysis is, where you go through and you say, this is what the law says I'm supposed to be doing. Am I doing it? One of the things it says you're supposed to do is a risk analysis. And people go, yep, that's what I'm doing right now. No, not so much. But one of the big points was you better include something about ransomware in your risk analysis to say how much of a threat is it, what would the impact be, what's the likelihood. And at this point, when 3 more hospitals got hit since the big news about Hollywood that we talked about on our ransomware episode, 3 more hospitals got hit. You were just telling me about it this morning. And so much so, it's good to see that, they're not all responding the same way as Hollywood Presbyterian did. So the one Kentucky Memorial, I think, they say we're on internal
lockdown,
but they've actually gone to backup systems. They had backup systems, unlike Hollywood Presbyterian, which just started sending patients elsewhere and everything was being done on paper. That's not a backup system so much. I guess it is, but is it? Is it really? It's not a backup system. So yes, ransomware and having that occurred was a big topic at the HIPAA Summit. And while the HIPAA Summit was going on, these additional attacks were being launched. So it's going to be a bigger issue. And something that, we clearly said, you got to worry about it. So making sure you have an actual real risk analysis is this same point that I've heard every year at the HIPAA Summit. And I think this is my 4th or 5th year sitting in on the HIPAA Summit. I can't remember how many. Every year, talk about risk analysis, what they're really supposed to have. And we've done episodes on risk analysis, and I've got articles on risk analysis, but you still get people who will give you that their risk analysis is simply the questions on whether or not they're meeting the policies and procedure requirements, So that was a big piece. There was another new term. I forgot to put it in the show notes, but another new term on the HIPAA Summit that I thought was really interesting was privacy by design. And they were essentially saying that privacy should become part of the organization's discussion for everything that you do, so that it's built into the entire design of the organization, regardless of what the project might be, whether the project is buying new software or implementing new hardware or redoing a office or adding a new building or bringing in a new provider, adding a new payer, whatever the project is, no matter what it is, privacy should be at the table of that discussion. And so they've termed it privacy by design. I thought it was quite interesting. It's certainly something that we've talked about over and over, but actually giving it a term somehow, helps bundle it up and people can remember privacy by design. Instead of, I tell software companies, you should have something on your development project notes and on your bug reports and whatnot, where somebody actually has to check off, does it have HIPAA implications or privacy and security implications or whatever you want to call it? It needs to be on there. And if you're doing this, you need to consider, your physical security guidelines if you're rebuilding your office or opening a new one or whatever, or you're moving. all of those things, your privacy and security should be built into it. And they are actually saying that exact same thing, but gave it a name and made it a program to teach everybody that it's supposed to be part of the design of whatever you're designing. So I thought that was pretty awesome. And the cybersecurity framework, they have come out, NIST came out with a crosswalk between HIPAA and the cybersecurity framework, which, that just made my propeller spin. And that's fairly new. It just came out in the last few weeks. And they talked about it briefly at the HIPAA Summit as well. But those were not the biggest topics. So you want to talk about the big topics?
Let me guess. Was BAs one of them?
You think? BAs were mentioned in almost every single presentation in some way, other than the ones that we're just talking about, transaction code sets. If it was privacy or security focused, it talked about BAs. There was one presentation that said something to the effect of BAs, managing BAs, what you don't know could cost you.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've certainly said it over and over and over again. And one of the presentations that I am doing in 2016 at different events is business associate management. And it's clear that it's a big gaping hole and a big problem. And I think when some of this other stuff starts happening, like the new audit program, we're going to see more of that gaping hole exposed. So definitely business associates, if you are one, quit trying to pretend you're not. That's a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you sign a BAA. Make sure that both CEs and BAs know what's in their BAAs. Make sure that your BAA between you and a CE is not the same one that you use between you and another BA, because then they don't make sense. They're upstream and downstream and all these things. I mean, you've got to have these things done for real. You can't just grab a template and slap it out there. Anybody got a BAA?
Yeah. And then for the business associates, they have to realize they have to do their own due diligence and keeping up with the business associate management as well. They can't just
you gotta
say, hey, I can't say, I'm just going to sign a BAA with this covered entity and I'm good to go.
Yeah.
I mean, that might be the case, but chances are I probably outsource something that I'm going to have to, deal with. And that BAA should have that documentation in there, that wording in there that says I'm required to make sure I do due diligence on my vendors that I'm giving that information to and that they're signing the proper paperwork and doing the HIPAA stuff as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, but there's plenty of people that sign the BAA that says they're going to do it, and then when you ask them if they're going to do it, they say not applicable. So
no, they say I got this.
We're better than this. We got this. Yeah, we got this. No worries. We're HIPAA compliant. So it is a big problem, and we get on our soapbox about it repeatedly. You just sent me recently a whole thing about how easy HIPAA is for IT companies. There's just not that much to do.
Nope. Just not that much.
Yeah. You don't have to worry about it. The fact that you need to make sure that your clients are compliant is totally irrelevant to your own compliance. And your compliance is so easy. It's easy. There's not much to it. It's tiny. Okay.
Yeah. If you're in the IT field, if you're a managed service provider or an IT professional, that's probably something that you hear all the time about. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. HIPAA's easy. It's only 8 pages.
Yeah, there's nothing to it. There's nothing to it.
But and it's funny because within, and you see this too, Donna, but within the membership I have, the HIPAA for MSPs, I don't think we've ever had a member join and say, "Oh, wow, it's just as easy as I thought it would be."
No.
Every single one of them were like, "Oh my goodness, I did not have any idea it was this involved."
And often they've been working with somebody else who's been telling them it's easy.
Yeah.
And then they realize, because we have IT companies that are starting to work with us, not even through HIPAA for MSPs. They come to us and they say, we need a partner that's actually going to help us do this stuff, not just give us a list of what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially what most of them do. It's easy, just do this.
Yep.
And then you go to do that and you're like, wait a minute, how do I even do it? So there's a big mess. It's going to be a big storm. And you're going to see some of that happening sooner rather than later, I think. There's going to be a lot more coming of it. And, it's going to be through resolution agreements. It's going to be through the new audit program, which we're going to get to that in just a second, because I want to give a couple of more things that OCR pointed out, so we don't forget them. And then we'll talk quickly about the audit program. But we're probably going to need to have a whole session on what the audit program involves, just to make sure that we get that message out. Although statistically, it's not a big deal, but it will be news. So OCR did make a point of saying we've revamped our website, which they have. It's a little bit easier to navigate. They added a new Q&A space for application developers to help them understand, get guidance, ask questions. What does this mean? How can I do that? Which is pretty interesting to read, because you will read some of the stuff of, do I really have to do HIPAA, is what you read between the lines. It's pretty interesting just to go read those. They have a new cybersecurity section, a broadcast list, that when they get cybersecurity issues, they can broadcast it out, and you can sign up for that broadcast list. I'm not really sure about that, because most of the time when I see something come off that list, I already know about it, but that's us. And not everybody. So unless you're tapped into a lot of cybersecurity stuff, you probably need to be on that listserv. It's at the OCR website. We can give you a link to that on our website. Then there's a litany of new privacy guidance, particularly relating to rights to access and what you can and cannot charge people for making copies of their medical records. And the fact that, people can now, with their EHR, plug in a stick and dump the EHR off to a stick and give it to somebody, and then they charge them the same amount as if they were copying 100 pages. And they're frowning upon that. They're like, you can charge for the labor, you can't charge for all these other things. So they're making it really clear what you can charge for. But I did find a couple of conversations quite interesting along there, when they're like, the question was, well, if somebody brings in their own USB drive and says, I want you to put my medical records on there, but your security policies say that I can't use a stick that's not cleaned or approved by my IT people, what do I do? You're telling me I can't tell the patient no. And they're like, no, you can tell the patient we can't use one that you give us, but we can give it to you another way, and here's the other ways we can give it. So there was that, which is a really interesting point, because people are going to say, well, now I've got to tell the IT people, well, I've got to stick it in there. Patient gave it to me.
Please don't put somebody else's USB drives.
No,
oh, man.
No, don't do that. Not unless you've got endpoint security that's going to scan it the minute it hits. So
even then, just don't.
Just don't do it.
Just don't do it. That's just a nightmare.
So they did make it clear, that you do get to draw the line and say, the risk to me is way higher than your request, but I can offer you these alternatives, and here's these alternatives, which I saw as a great opportunity to say, here, I'll go out and buy, a ton of these USB sticks with my logos and stuff on them, and then, make them available much cheaper to people. I don't know. But anyway, I saw people doing that. And then the other point, they ask about unsecured email. And that if a patient, and we've talked about this before, if a patient says, I want you to email my records to my Gmail account, and it's not secured, you still have to do it. But you want to make sure that the patient understands it's not secure and it doesn't meet your obligations to secure and protect their information. So then the question was, well, do we have to get it in writing? I mean, you're saying the patient can just say, do it, I don't care. And they said, and they're the lawyers from OCR, so they can never make a strong commitment anyway, right? And we're talking about the director of OCR and the director of privacy and security for OCR. So not low-level people. And so their answer to that question was, we're not telling you how you have to get confirmation from the patient that they understand it's not secure. However, If the patient later says they didn't know it wasn't secure and we're going to come ask you, did you tell them? You're probably going to want to be able to prove that somehow.
I love how they answered the question without answering the question.
Well, number one, you have to give it to them if they're asking for it, as long as you tell them that it's not secure.
Now, can you not encrypt it and send it to them? Because they can get the encrypted email.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of, ways that you can do that, but they're talking about patients don't want to have to go to a portal. They don't want to have to do a code, and they don't want to have to know anything. They just want to get it in their email. And there's plenty of people that do that. All I know how to do is the email. Just give me the email, and so that's part of the conversation.
Just come pick up your 50 copies.
So, they are encouraging to do it on electronic media. And then there's a really funny thing where everybody was talking about APIs. This was the big, all these non-technical people talking about APIs. And one guy even said, I think APIs are here to stay. And I busted out laughing because I'm like, you know what? I think in the middle 80s, I was dealing with APIs. I'm pretty sure I've never not dealt with some sort of API. I mean, APIs have been around a long time. Just because you're now hearing about it does not mean it's new. So the entire concepts of interoperability involve APIs and in some method, because you're not just going to write into somebody else's database. There's going to be some sort of API for the interface. So there was a big discussion about that as if it was some new concept, which was kind of funny to me.
Like HIPAA, HIPAA's new.
It is to some people. So, there were a lot of those discussions, it was quite interesting. But they were encouraging people to evaluate the cybersecurity framework because it does offer additional information over HIPAA, but they're not saying you're required to do it, of course, because you're not. But I do find it something we'll certainly be using and incorporating into what we do. But then the big news was the announcement, and last week I said I wouldn't be surprised if they announced the audit program, and I was right. I know. You get excited every now and then when you get to say, I was right. They did. And they said it officially started. They're sending out confirmations of addresses. There'll be emails and such saying, we're confirming that we have the right contact person, and if you're not the right one, you need to send it on to who is or tell us who it is, and you got 14 days to turn it around. And then they said very sternly, do not ignore these. It will not keep you from being audited. In fact, it might move you up on the list. It's kind of what they
if you ignore it, it won't go away.
Yeah.
No ostrich techniques here.
Well, that's the general approach to HIPAA for most people. So anyhow, they're sending those out. And then once they do that, they're going to do some desktop audits of covered entities based on that selection pool that they get. And then once they do those desktop audits, they're going to ask those covered entities to provide them information on their business associate management, the contracts, who they got, blah, 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 who all their business associates are, and then they'll put all of those into a pool and select business associates to audit.
Awesome.
I know. So
now the business associates have a pucker factor.
Yeah. If you're a business associate and one of your covered entities says they're being audited, know that puts you in the selection pool. So then they select business associates, and they're going to do some desktop audits of that. And then they're going to do on-site audits where they'll be there 3 to 5 days evaluating your compliance program. You can be selected for both a desktop and an on-site audit, or just one or the other. So then
sounds like a lottery I don't want to win.
I know, really. So the cool thing is there's only going to be, they did say two things. There's only going to be 200 in this first pass that they will do total. So statistically, you're more likely to suffer a breach or have a complaint that will bring you into the crosshairs, so to speak, than being audited, except if you're a business associate. That's a different story because they're not getting in those crosshairs the same so far anyway. They should worry about being caught in the audit more than a covered entity, really. And then the other calming thing is if you're already under investigation for a breach or a complaint, you will not be included in the audit pool. So if I'm already all up in your business, I don't need to be further up in there. So they are saying that. But they're looking for specific things on privacy, like show us your notice of privacy practices and some policies surrounding that and proof that you're actually distributing it. And they joked about how, if you're a HIPAA person and you're filling out your paperwork and you walk up there and you say, you're having me sign the thing that I saw the notice of privacy practices, but you didn't give me one. And then everybody's like, does anybody know where one of these is? Here's one. The only one we have left is Spanish. Do you speak Spanish? No. And then, I've actually had people after they search for 5 minutes tell me, oh, it's on the wall over there. You go around this corner, there's a little cubby and it's on the wall over there hidden. So you better know that you're actually giving it to people, or at least they have the opportunity to see it, and that the one on your website is not from 2003. It is current. And know that all of that new guidance that they've released, some of that's going to potentially, depending on how your MPP is done, it could affect it. So they're going to be looking for those things as the right to access and all of that new stuff. They're going to be looking to see how that affects things. And then on security, guess what they're going to ask for?
Risk analysis.
They're going to ask for a risk analysis, your recent risk analysis, or your, all the risk analysis you've performed in the last 6 years and the associated mitigation plans. Bam! Bam, chicka, bam, bam. Not that fun. And then, of course, do you have your written breach response plan and, have here's what the letter would say if we have to send it. And business associates, you do need, I don't care what anybody says, you're going to be caught with your pants down if you don't have a plan. I'm just saying. Because they have every right to send it back to you to do the notifications. And if that's the case and you say you don't have to do them, here we go in a vicious cycle. And you don't want to be left there. Plus, a lot of the BAAs now have indemnification that says you're going to take care of it. You're going to cover all the cost of notifying people, dealing with it, all of that stuff. It's your problem if you cause it. So as a business associate, if you are told you don't have to do it, might want to question the source. I'm just saying. Because, if you talk to the privacy officers and the lawyers, they're going to tell you got to do it. I'm just saying. So, they're going to ask for those kind of things. And of course, when they do they'll have a website you go to and you upload all of this. And if they have questions, they'll let you know. So you'll have 10 days, maybe 14, to supply all that. Bam. And of course, all your business associate information.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough. Just enough.
10 days, maybe 14 days. So don't be waiting around. Don't be waiting around in case you hear it. You're not going to be able to grab that stuff. You're not going to be able to make it up. It ain't happening.
You just stressed out everybody listening. I'm glad you said that last. All right, so what would you tell somebody, hypothetically, if they don't have their ducks in a row, maybe they haven't done a risk analysis except for 4 or 5 years ago or whatever. I mean, what would you tell them? Because I don't want people to go, oh, I don't have any of this stuff. There's no hope for me. I'm just going to stick my head in the sand and because I can't get it all done. I mean, what would you tell them?
Doing something is better than doing nothing.
Right.
That's it. I mean, do something. At least you'll have something. Because if you give them nothing, that's serious willful neglect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what you want to stay away from. If you haven't done anything, you're probably going to get some slap on the wrist. But like Donna said, if you're showing that you're doing something, that you're working towards something, then you avoid that willful neglect, that minimum $50,000 fine
And
and corrective action plans and all this other stuff.
Well, and I think that's what happened with Lincare. I mean, it's not in the details, but they were basically considered willful neglect, so they don't even do a resolution or anything. They don't negotiate. Here's your fine. Boom. Here's what you're going to have to do. Boom. We're not even going to talk about it. And that's why they got $240,000 and some other stuff they got to worry about. So
do something.
Something's better than nothing. Always.
All right. Now, see if I can close this thing off. Man, that's some heavy stuff at the end.
I know. If you only listen to the beginning, you're going to miss out.
Yep. So that's our show for today. We'd like to thank everybody for listening. Don't forget to review us on iTunes. Go ahead and take some time as soon as you're done here and head on over there and do a quick review. It helps other people to see what we're doing and gives us a little bit of iTunes love and pushes us up in the rankings. So we appreciate that. Also, don't forget to share us out on social media, whichever platform you choose. Just share it out and let people know we're out there. This is the absolute best free training available anywhere on HIPAA. I guarantee it. Find us on the web at helpmewithhipaa.com. We also have a new URL you can use called thehippapodcast.com. Takes you to the same website, but it's a little easier for people to remember sometimes. Thehippapodcast.com. Don't forget also, on our website, you can leave a question right on our page there. We have what's called a speak pipe widget where you can record your voice and everything. We might even use your question in a future podcast. So that's it for me. What about you, Donna? Anything else?
Oh, I'm all done.
All done. Very good. Well, just remember, folks, HIPAA is not about compliance. It is about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.